if you had to right now put in a time capsule your best answer and thesis and final thoughts and words on the hard problem of consciousness, and we fast forward to the moment that problem is solved, if it is, right? And we then go back and look at Sam Harris's words and thoughts on the matter. What would you say if you had to put that in there?
Well, so it depends on what the solution is. So the hard problem is that, and this comes to us courtesy of the philosopher David Chalmers, who coined the phrase. He pointed out that there are all the, quote, easy problems of understanding the mind, which is just you can understand how, for instance, with vision, there's light that comes in and hits the retina and gets, so you have electromagnetic energy that gets transformed into electrochemical energy in the nervous system. You have a series of neuronal firings as a result of light hitting the retina. And that gets encoded in visual cortex in various patterns. And there's what's called a retinotopic mapping of the visual scene on visual cortex. And there's certain cells that are responsive to lines at a certain angle. And we've come to understand all of this. It's very complicated, but nothing in principle is profoundly counterintuitive. And every step along the way, we can understand what light is doing to specific molecules in the retina, how those molecules affect downstream neuronal firing, and then what happens, how neurons function physically, chemically, electrochemically, how genetic encoding of protein relates to all of that, receptors and neurotransmitters. Like there's just it's clockwork at bottom. It's wet, it's messy, it's complicated, but it is really. Our intuitions run all the way through as you drill down on the micro of details. There are no surprises. Like the causality makes sense all the way through. What doesn't make sense at all, and what is profoundly counterintuitive, is that at some point along the way, there's something that it's like to see. Right, like we could imagine building a robot on the principles of our visual system, and having it visually navigate the world based on visual data, but have it effectively be unconscious. There'd be nothing that it's like to be that robot. That robot would not experience vision in any way, all the while performing functionally in the world as a system that's making use of visual data. In our case, we have the full pyrotechnics of conscious life. We have the conscious experience of vision, and that is fundamentally mysterious. There's no description of the micro events that makes the emergence of conscious vision perspicuous, understandable. And what's worse, and the reason why this is really truly the hard problem as opposed to just yet another easy problem that we may one day solve, is that it seems impossible to imagine what could be an explanation that would intuitively run through. It's like you can't say, oh, but if only neurons were firing at this frequency, well then I understand why there's something that it's like to see, right? No frequency seems even relevant, right? It's like it simply does not matter what frequency it is, or how many neurons you get, or what their pattern of connectivity is, or what neurotransmitters are involved, or none of that matters. Like that, all of that is as strange as saying that, if a wind blows across a trailer park at exactly 146 miles an hour, and the trailer park is filled with watermelons and beer, that whole system becomes conscious, becomes a conscious mind. There's something that it's like to be a trailer park, right? But if you take away the watermelon, it's not conscious anymore, right? It's a mere statement of a miracle, right? And that's what it seems like it would be happening in the case of any story about the wheelworks of neurophysiology. So the hard problem is, if consciousness emerges on the basis of unconscious complexity, first you have unconscious information processing. First you have unconscious molecules, chemicals bouncing around. But that at a certain point of integration, at a certain point of encoding, the lights come on, right? If that's the way things work, those of us who are enamored of the hard problem would say it's always going to seem like a miracle, right? Like it's like that's not understandable. That's the equivalent of saying before the Big Bang there was truly nothing, and then everything exploded into being, right? Like there's not just that there was nothing, there was no heat and no energy and no matter. There were no laws of nature either. There was like nothing. But then in a certain moment, everything appeared, including the laws of nature by which anything would further appear, right? Okay, that if you believe that, I mean, as Terence McKenna once said, if you can believe that, you can believe anything. Like that, it seems to be the limit case for extreme credulity, I think is what he said, right? So that is the hardest thing possible to believe because nothing is real nothing, not just not having space time, but like nothing, not having laws of nature, not having anything, right? Real nothing is precisely what can't give rise to something, let alone everything. Analogously, true unconsciousness, true nothing that it's like to be this system, is precisely the thing that can't give rise to the something of consciousness, right? And so it doesn't matter how you order it. It doesn't matter. It's not going to be intelligible. Now, that doesn't mean that it isn't true, right? So I'm willing to say that it could just be a fact that neurons in a certain configuration give rise to consciousness, and if you change the configuration slightly, there's nothing that it's like to be that set of neurons, right? So consciousness could truly be an emergent property of unconscious complexity, and I'm just not capable of understanding how it's just it's just a brute fact, right? And okay, so that's just, we would have to acknowledge that is a condition in which we don't actually have a normal scientific explanation. Like our scientific explanation of life is truly a reduction that works. And it's like it used to be that people thought there was a profound mystery between distinguishing living and non-living objects, right? So like there's a living system like an animal and a non-living system like a machine, and there must be some life force that explains this difference. Now, if you leave consciousness aside, right, and you're actually just talking about the how we define life and just what a system has to be to qualify as living, how it metabolizes energy and reproduces, and I mean, like the definition of life is a little fuzzy at the boundaries. But for instance, it's not entirely clear whether it applies to something like a virus, say. But it's a semantic judgment as to whether it would. But once you define your terms and you understand something like the molecular basis of inheritance, just how DNA works and how cells divide and how gametes form and get together, and how it's like there is no more to the mystery. Like we now know how babies get made, and we know how we pass on our genes, and we know why kids resemble their parents, and we know, the biology of inheritance is, again, it's very complex. There's still things we don't totally understand about it, but there are no real mysteries, right? Like it is a concatenation of physical facts that when you drill down far enough, it's amazing, but it's not confounding, right?
Yeah.
But add consciousness to this picture, there's no place for it. Like there's no evidence of consciousness in the universe apart from our direct experience of it. And there's no indication that it would exist or should exist apart from our direct experience of it. And yet our direct experience of it is the only thing really that we can be certain of, right? It's like, so far be it that there are some, imbecilic statements that occasionally come out of philosophy and neuroscience that suggest that consciousness might be an illusion, right? Consciousness is the one thing in this universe that simply cannot be an illusion, right? Because it is the thing that would give rise to any possible illusion, right? Like even if you were completely confused about what reality is, even if you're in the Matrix, right, or this is all a simulation, in some alien supercomputer, or you're a brain in a vat, or you're psychotic, and you could be confused about everything. You can't be confused that something seems to be happening. Okay. Right? That seeming is what we mean by consciousness. Semi-paradoxically, though we don't understand it, we don't understand how it arises, or even at bottom whether it does in fact arise. I mean, it could be a more fundamental constituent of the universe, though I'm not sure what I believe about that. Though we don't understand it, and we don't understand its place in nature, we can understand that it's the one thing we are absolutely certain of in each moment. Mm-hmm. And it's the basis upon which any further certainty would be granted to us about anything. I mean, it is our conscious life that is the only condition in which we do science, in which we think about eternal truths of mathematics or anything else. I mean, it's like all of cognition, effectively, even though we understand that in our case it very likely has unconscious precursors, right? I mean, they're cognitive operations. There's a lot to our mental lives that seems to be happening in the dark. But anything that we can actually notice and talk about and directly experience is, by definition, something that's happening in consciousness.
That was so fascinating for me as a listener, cool. Just aside from being the host of this show, which I now need to continue on with being. So if you had to give your answer, would you say it's then consciousness, awareness,
Oh, yeah, so I didn't give you the time capsule answer after all that rigmarole. I did not give you the answer. So my answer is just that there's two possibilities. If it emerges from unconscious complexity at some level, that may be true. That may actually be the right answer. If that's true, I think we will never understand that in the way we want to understand any other thing. It's like there are things we understand. We really do understand them, and that will not be one of those things. Again, we understand how DNA works, at least to a first approximation, right? We understand how it's like if you shatter a window, we understand why it shatters and why it doesn't just melt, right? Like because we understand about the lattice structure of the molecules, right? It's like brittleness at the higher level is the thing you would expect to emerge given the way the atoms in that substance are arranged. And so it is with the wetness of water, right? Like it's like there are emergent properties, but yet they're understandable. Consciousness is not that sort of emergent property. So if this is in fact true in 100 years, if we just if the aliens land and tell us this is how consciousness arises, it's exactly this kind of unconscious processing that gives it, that turns the lights on, and look, we turn the dial a little bit and the lights go out and then they're back on, they're out. You can play with this dial as much as you want. And you'll notice that it's just this is exactly what consciousness is in any physical system. Okay, that's amazing. That's a miracle. We don't understand it, but we can then live on that basis. We could design conscious computers on that basis, right? Like we could design, as I think we would want to, unconscious computers that can't suffer and can't be happy, and when you turn them off, you're not murdering them, right? Because there's nothing that it's like to be those computers. We cannot make the mistake of accidentally building conscious computers, because now we understand that consciousness is, the way the lights go on is this way, and we can decide when we do that. But I think it's more likely that we will, in the near term, far before we actually think we understand the true neural correlates of consciousness, I think we'll build computers that we think are conscious because they just seem to be conscious. You know, and we might build them in such a way where they claim to be conscious. But those of us who understand the hard problem won't know. You know, it'll just be it'll fundamentally be mysterious as to whether they're conscious, and yet we'll helplessly relate to them as though they are conscious because it'll seem psychopathic not to. I mean, especially if you build anything like a humanoid robot that really has appropriate facial expressions and tones of voice and is obviously passing the Turing test because it's smarter than you are, and it's totally aware of your emotions, and it seems to have emotions of its own because it's been built that way, and you'll helplessly feel like you're in relationship to another conscious being, and I think most of us will just lose sight of whether the boundary between consciousness and unconsciousness was ever an interesting problem. We just won't know, you know, and we'll forget about it.
Yeah. So I'm asking you to speak to some obvious unknowns here, right? So you would say essentially, to boil it down, your best guess is that it's probably unconscious complexity, if you had to put it.
So the alternative to that is that no, it doesn't in fact emerge. It goes all the way down into the most basic constituents of matter, or this opposition between matter and consciousness is at bottom misconceived, and there's some, you know, the technical phrase for this in philosophy is neutral monism. I think it was Bertrand Russell who gave us this phrase, but there's some neutral position conceptually from which to understand mind and matter that doesn't admit of this dualism. So it's like currently it just seems like there's a mystery. There's the physics of things, and then there's mind and consciousness, but you know, now even mind without consciousness isn't even all that mysterious. So it's really just there's physics that's unconscious, and then there's consciousness, and we don't know how to marry them. We don't know where consciousness comes into the picture. Well, let's just say it doesn't come into the picture. Let's say it goes all the way down. Let's say that there's something that it's like to be an electron on some level, right? It doesn't mean that an electron is thinking. It doesn't mean that it uses language. But like there's some interior dimension to everything that we would recognize as consciousness. The lights are on, in some sense, all the way down. Now, I think there are reasons to be doubtful of that. I mean, I think that it doesn't truly solve the hard problem because we still have the problem of this apparent difference between everything we can be consciously aware of in our experience and the stuff that still seems to be going on in the dark that we know is related to the stuff we can be aware of, right? So, I mean, you asked me a few minutes ago about gurus who misbehave, and I gave you an example of a rock star, and the best I could do was John Bon Jovi, right? So so I'm thinking, I go into rock star search mode, right? I'm looking for rock stars in my memory, and for whatever reason, I know the names of many performers, but John Bon Jovi is the one that came up, dating me and scandalizing everyone who actually cares about modern music, presumably. But it's fundamental. So as aware as I can possibly be of my experience, I can't be aware of the search algorithm that's happening in my brain that is promoting various rock stars from memory. Yeah. And I mean, I could consciously decide, okay, no, John, there's no way I'm saying John Bon Jovi. I'm just going to wait here until I get something else, right? And something else will come. But there's some set of physical events that is conspiring to curate those deliverances from memory that I can't inspect, right? And it's still I know my brain is doing it, but it seems not to be associated with consciousness. Now, it's possible that there's some other way of understanding consciousness where no, there's actually that would push consciousness back even into that, which is maybe there are multiple conscious points of view even in a single brain, right? Maybe and there is something that it's like to be the part of me that was just doing the math on, old memories, right? But I somehow doubt it. Like that doesn't seem like the most parsimonious way to explain our experience in light of what we know about the brain. So, but these are fundamentally different pictures. If consciousness goes all the way down to bedrock, well then that's hard. That's also hard to understand. But it's hard to understand anything that goes down to bedrock. I mean, we don't at a certain point in science, you just have to admit that you take certain things as given. I mean, it's just, and whether space and time are among those givens is a matter of debate. I mean, there are physicists who are trying to find ways of thinking about physics that don't take space and time as primitives. Space and time are emergent phenomenon of some more basic physics, but there are other approaches to physics that take space-time as primitive. So anyway, at a certain point, you have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and you can't be pretending to understand the straps, right? Like there's a brute fact of something that you're assuming axiomatically in order to do any kind of further work of understanding anything. This is true mathematically. It's true scientifically, and it's possible that consciousness is just one of those things. So then in 1,000 years we might say, no, consciousness is one of the things you don't have to understand. Consciousness is like space-time, right? It's just the condition in which all of this is happening, right? Or consciousness is like, causality, right? Like causes precede events. We're not gonna spend any time trying to figure out if there's something deeper than causality. The beginning of everything was the beginning. We're not going to ask ourselves how the beginning began. I mean, there's just, there's no, I think scientists, there might be some exceptions here, but basically science has given up on coming up with a set of laws that become perfectly self-explanatory. There's going to be some brute, axiomatic fact that is just a starting point.
So diving because I'm mindful of the time that we have left. I do want to touch on free will here a little bit. You would kind of final thought is that you would probably lean towards, if you had to say the best guess, unconscious complexity. Like if in a succinct way, because you're more qualified to speak on this than most people.
The truth is I just don't know how consciousness arises. I would not, on some level, I would not be surprised by any variant of this thesis. It's like, if in fact consciousness is integrated with matter in a way that we just fundamentally don't understand, and we're misled by all of our interrogation of the brain and general anesthesia, and the consciousness seems to get turned off in that case. And it's like there's some other purview from which this whole problem intellectually seems different, and we're just confused. Analogous to we're dealing with 3 dimensions of space, and we just have not thought about the possibility of a 4th dimension of anything, right? Like we just haven't done the math, and the curvature of space is, or much less space-time, is not something we just can't imagine because we just don't have the concept for it. Maybe there's something analogous there that would just makes the problem seem different. But that wouldn't surprise me, and it also wouldn't surprise me if it's emerging on the basis of information processing in some configuration, and that's always going to seem like a miracle to us. Right? So
wonderful. So again, quickly, if you had to say a best guess probability, what do you feel is a likelihood that we will engineer consciousness into super intelligent AGI?
Well, as I said, I think the far more likely situation is that we'll create the intelligence and have no idea whether it's conscious.
It'll be indistinguishable.
Yeah. It'll seem more conscious than us because it'll be more intelligent than us. I have no doubt. There is simply no doubt that intelligence is substrate independent. I mean, there's just no reason to think that there's something magical about biology with respect to what we mean by intelligence. I mean, what we have now is already so effectively intelligent that, even if you're going to come at it in a piecemeal way, even if forget about trying to perfectly emulate human intelligence. Let's just take the top 100 things we care about as acts of cognition and intelligence. Each one of those can, we already know it's like arithmetic. Yes, you can build a superhuman calculator, and all of us have one in our pockets right now. It's just your smartphone is better at arithmetic than you will ever be, and just add up all of those capacities. We know they're all substrate independent, and we know recognizing faces and recognizing the gender of faces and recognizing voices and all of that is, all of these human attributes are accomplished in silico now, right? So I think it's not going to be much longer before we have systems that pass the Turing test in all the ways that could matter to us. I mean, even if they seem weird in some other ways or just not quite human enough. I mean, they'll fail the Turing test the moment they pass it, because they'll pass it so spectacularly, it'll be obvious they're not human. Right? It's like it's already obvious that no human has instantaneous access to everything on the internet, right? So the fact that I can ask ChatGPT something and it can give me facts more comprehensively and in a more orderly way and faster than any person can, even if it's not perfect in other areas. The fact that I can say, what are the causes of World War II? And it, within 5 seconds, can give me a mini essay on the causes of World War II that's better than, any, academic historian can accomplish in the same span of time. All right, it's already superhuman. I already know there's not a little man in the box, typing, his answer to me. So they will be, the moment they're general, they'll be not human level, but superhuman. And the moment we give them any kind of relational capacity that matters, the moment they become sensitive to our tone of voice and our facial expression, and the moment we're integrated with them, you're piping your watch data or your Ring data to your AI assistant, so it's been tracking your heart rate and sleep cycles too, right? It's integrating all that information for you. Then you're going to be talking to a machine. Forget about a humanoid robot where that's going to make it seem like Westworld. I mean, even if it's just Siri on your phone, but just the next iteration of Siri that is, essentially ChatGPT 5, plus all of your health data. You're going to be in the presence of something that is more observant of your inner life than any person can be from the outside. So it's going to know you better than your spouse knows you on some level, right? Especially if it's reading your emails and reading your texts, and it's read everything you've ever published and listened to all, like in my case, my wife hasn't listened to my podcasts, right? Like I've got 300 episodes of my podcast that my virtual assistant will have heard, right? My wife hasn't heard them, so she doesn't know what I was thinking about for all those hours, right? I'm going to be in the presence of Siri that can say, Sam, you definitely, you look tired, you sound tired. You're not here are 5 things I want you to pay attention to. This is what you forgot you wanted to do today, but you sent that email to. It's like it will be. The moment the thing is responsive to you relationally, you are going to helplessly feel that you're in the presence of the smartest, most perceptive person you've ever met. And that's going to feel like being in the presence of consciousness, right? Especially if we don't, if we hamstring the thing to say at every moment, to remind us at every moment, listen, I'm just a dumb machine. You're not killing me when you turn me off. I'm not conscious, and nothing that's like to be me. You haven't solved the hard problem. That's possible, but at a certain point, I don't know. Again, for me, Westworld is unimaginable because in the presence of perfectly humanoid robots, which is to say, we're out of the uncanny valley. They no longer look weird. They look human, so their facial displays of emotion are not spooky. They're just like they look human. If we ever get there, and I don't think there's any reason to think we won't. There's no way you could have a place like Westworld where you're treating them badly and raping them and killing them and like because you will feel like a psychopath. You will be viewed as a psychopath by other people. Like if that's your idea of fun, if your idea of fun is to rape and kill Dolores, right? You're a rapist murderer, right? That's and it doesn't matter that she's a robot, right? Because it's too compelling an illusion. The fact that you were able to give yourself over to the illusion with that kind of, rapacity, proves that there's something wrong with you, right? And so so Westworld, I think, is unthinkable, or at least otherwise it would just function as a bug light for psychopaths. So which is to say that once we're in the presence of anything like a perfectly compelling humanoid robot, it's going to be a very weird world, and we're not going to know, very likely we're not going to know whether they're conscious, and yet we're going to helplessly relate to them as though they're people.